We are learning Mishnayos Chagiga, Perek Aleph, Chapter 1, Mishna Daled, Mishnah 4. Before we read the Mishnah, let's read through an introduction here. It's something we already discussed, but this is a very good introduction for this Mishnah. All right. The Mishnah returns discussing the Shalmei Simcha, the Shlamim Karbanis that one is brought to fulfill the mitzvah of Simcha. The Torah states regarding the Shalosh Regalim, V'samach lifnei Hashem Elokecha, you shall rejoice before Hashem your God. The Gemara teaches that ein simcha ela b'basar. Rejoicing is only through eating meat, and it means eating meat of a carbon, of a sacrifice. Thus, the mitzvah to rejoice on the festivals is fulfilled by eating the meat of a carbon, of a sacrifice. In the previous Mishnah, we learned that for this reason the sages ruled that a person should bring shalmei simcha on the festivals, so that he has enough meat of offerings to eat. So besides the oil that you have to bring and the shlamim that you have to bring, there's going to be another shlamim in order to fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. However, if he has meat from other offerings, he can fulfill his obligation by eating that meat. So you don't have to have a special carbon to fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. If you're eating carbon meat, you will fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. If you don't have any other carbon to eat from, then you'll bring a carbon shlamim, a separate carbon shlamim, separate than the chagiga. You'll bring another shlamim carbon in order to fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. But if you've got other carbon meat, if you've got other sacrifice meat to eat, you can fulfill it through that. So now the Mishnah is going to talk about that idea. They can fulfill the requirement of simcha through the meat of karbanis, other than a special shlamim brought for that purpose. So Mishnah reads, Yisrael, a non-kohen, yoytzim yidei chayvasen, they can fulfill their obligation of simcha, b'nedarim u'nedavis, with voluntary offerings. Neder is a voluntary offering where you accept upon yourself to bring the offering, and this person volunteered a shlamim. He accepted upon himself to bring a shlamim. And if he brings that, and if he comes on Yontif to fulfill that obligation, and he eats from that meat, he's going to fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. Or nedavis. Nedavis is also a voluntary carbon. It's just that instead of accepting it upon yourself, you directly designated a specific animal for that purpose. And again, if it's a shlamim and it's a shlamim, you're going to go ahead and you're going to eat from that meat to fulfill that vow that you made. But nonetheless, you're eating meat of the carbon, and you'll fulfill the mitzvah that way. Uva meiser behema, or let's say you're using the meiser behema. Meiser behema, the tithing of the animals is that every person has a mitzvah to take a tenth, to separate a tenth of the cattle, sheep, and goats that were born to his flocks that year. He separates a tenth of it, and the meat of those offering is eaten by the owner at the base of mikdash. Brings it as a carbon, as a shlamim, and he eats it. And he eats it there. Okay, so if you have that meiser behema and you're bringing it on, and again, you can't bring it on Yontif itself. You got to wait for Chalamayid to be able to do it. But on Chalamayid, the person will bring that carbon, fulfill his vow, and at the same time fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. Now, when it comes to kaihanim can do the above, but they have more options. If, let's say, a person brings a chatas, a sin offering, or nashim, or it's called a guilt offering, the owner doesn't eat from it, but the kaihanim do. So if the kaihanim are eating from this meat, they're eating meat of a sacrifice on Yontif, they fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. Ubabachar, or let's say a firstborn. The firstborn of a person's animals is given to the kohen. The kohen brings it as a sacrifice. It brings it as a carbon, as a sacrifice to Beis HaMikdash. He eats the meat, so he is eating a bachar, and also fulfilling the mitzvah of simcha. Ubechaz of a sheik, and with the breast and the sheik, which they translate as the breast and the thigh. Okay, breast and the thigh. So although what is that mitzvah of, what does it mean that kohen is eating a breast and a thigh? Although the meat of a toda or shlamim offering is eaten by the owner, if an owner brings a shlamim, a carbon toda, Thanksgiving offering, he eats the meat. The breast and thigh must be given to the kohanim to eat. Okay, so if the kohanim are eating the breast and the thigh from someone's carbon shlamim, they will be able to fulfill the mitzvah simcha through that. But you cannot fulfill this mitzvah with oifis, from bird offerings, nor from meal or flour offerings. Eating those things will not help you fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. And the reason for that is, the Gemara derives that only the meat of species that can be used for a chagiga offering can be eaten as fulfillment of the obligation to rejoice on the festivals. Birds and flower offerings, which may not be brought as a chagiga offering, are not included. So the type of animal that can be brought as a chagiga offering, you can fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. Even if it wasn't specifically brought for the purpose of that mitzvah, for the mitzvah of simcha, it has another purpose to it also. You're eating from its meat, you can fulfill the mitzvah. But it has to be from the meat of an animal that can be used to fulfill the obligation of the carbon chagiga. Birds and menachas and flower offerings can't do that, and therefore the mitzvah of simcha cannot be fulfilled through them.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Now, the Chofetz Chaim had mentioned that if you are we mentioned before that even if we say that the one of the three who heard the Lashon Hara can say it over because they're saying something over that's going to become well known, nonetheless, the person who heard it from one of those three, to be able to say that he can continue talking about it because it's going to be known, he can only do that on relying on what the person who told him Lashon Hara says. I heard it in front of three, but he can't rely on him for that, and therefore he doesn't necessarily have that heter, that permission to continue to talk about it, unless, as he says, it's something that is already very well known. Again, according to this opinion, that something that's already going to become known or is well known, there is no prohibition of Lashon Hara. Nearly, says the Chofetz Chaim, the Masipra Babay Klasoya B'fnei Anoshim Mirei Elokim Shenesara Misari Lashon Hara. Let's say that this story was told in front of three people who are God-fearing people who are careful not to speak Lashon Hara. Memeilen Davar Zeh Asi L'Skalis. Therefore, it comes out that this is not something that's going to be revealed. When you think about it, the whole idea is he says something in front of three people, and they're going to spread it. Now, and because they're going to spread it, and therefore it becomes well known, therefore they can say it. Well, someone's got to be saying it the first time before it became well known, right? If these three people are spreading it and making it well known, well, somebody at some point started talking about it first to make it well known, which at one point right away it wasn't well known. That person spoke Lashon Hara. So at the end of the day, if you're relying on this idea of because three people heard it and they're going to spread it to become well known, that means you're assuming someone is going to be speaking Lashon Hara, because it's got to start off that way. Yeah. So if therefore, says the Chofetz Chaim, if one of them is God-fearing and they won't speak Lashon Hara, that means it's not going to be spread. The imkain aser min hatayra l'saprachach, there is a la'acher. It's not going to help you. Even if only one of them is God-fearing, and that one person of the three is careful not to speak Lashon Hara in general, the same idea applies. You don't have three people spreading it anymore. The let's say one of the three is the person who is being spoken about, his friend, his relative. He's not going to speak a Lashon Hara. It's one can definitely consider strongly he's not going to spread it, and therefore there again you're not going to have your three people spreading, and therefore this permission that we're mentioning is not going to apply in these cases. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.